Hi, I'm Todd Rheingold. Welcome to another installment of I Got a Testimony. Today, I want to introduce a very special guest. He's been a friend of mine for a long time. His name is Stefan Williams. We're going to talk about a few things, and he's going to start off with a testimony. And as always, we want that testimony to bless you and encourage you, let you know there's more to what we see and do than what is immediately apparent. And what I'm trying to do with each show as well is have you all contact me at thehopefulaspirant@gmail.com. Let me know your personal testimonies and if you're willing to have me share them here. And also let me know if you'd be willing to be on camera. You know, you may end up on the show. I'm always looking for interesting content. And just to mention as well, my spiritual memoirs, which I completed, a 170-page manuscript of a 30-year journey, can be downloaded off my website, thehopefulaspirant.com, for $15.99. And there will be a link on the website to my YouTube channel. And if you subscribe in my YouTube channel, you'll get a special code and you can download the book for $9.99. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Stefan, and here we go. Thank you. We're on.
Hey guys, Todd and I have been speaking for the past few weeks as the show is being put together, and he asked me to join him for a segment that we're going to mention. This had to do with it was a traffic situation, and I was just going down the road and there was a car right next to me, and he was kind of trying to get in front of me, and I'm kind of getting irritated. Why is this guy driving like such a jerk or whatever? He ends up getting right in front of me and then speeding up, and we come up to an intersection, and he was just about 2 seconds in front of me, and as he went through the intersection, he was T-boned by a tractor trailer. It brought to my attention that we should not always think of the things that seem like mild inconveniences as troublesome. And oftentimes we may not be aware of it. That was a very immediate result for me to see, but everything that happens, it affects us for the rest of our lives when we're talking about timing and such. And just that couple of seconds was the difference between, I'm sure he didn't know that he was going to take a hit like that, but it was certainly better than me taking it. And from my perspective, it was a lot better than me taking it.
It makes me think of so many people that weren't in the World Trade Center on 911.
Right.
And how they said that, you know, they got a call from somebody and they were trying to get to work, but they had to take the call, so they didn't go in the building, or they really wanted to get the coffee and they got the coffee across the street, and that saved their lives. Of course, it always begs the question of, but what about the people who didn't get the call? Does that mean? And, you know, for our purposes, these are things I can't answer. When something wonderful happens, I'm the first one to say, you know, praise God. When something bad happens, I'm very humble about that. And, you know, there are people who will say, well, didn't God do that? Or isn't he responsible for that? How can you praise on one hand but what I do is I say, look, there are things that I don't know, and I don't know why all the time. And I just say that when I see tragedy or travesty, I always pray that it's not in vain. We're going through a really tough time right now with COVID and things happening around the country and the world, and some just awful things. And even something like before COVID with Kobe Bryant, you know, I'm not a huge basketball guy, but that really, really upset me, and I think the whole nation mourned. It was one of those things that we get used to death, but then there'll be one person. And so with Kobe, I prayed about it, and I just said to God, you know, he's got a family. I just pray somehow, some way that some good comes out of this.
Freak accident. You know?
Right, but you just don't. That's what I do. I try to look at the pain and the suffering in the world and just say, you know, try and trust the higher power and just say, somehow, some way, can something good come of this? And just believe that it can. And with every tragedy that we've experienced, it always happens. Even 911. It's your choice. You can focus on the terrible stuff and the people that died, but you should also focus on the brave cops and firemen and even civilians who went in and helped and rescued other people and you know, the way we pulled together, the way New York pulled together, the way the country pulled together. We were all on the same side for a while. It was a wonderful thing. So whenever there's a tragedy, there's a hero. There's somebody who stepped out of themselves, their normal way of thinking and behaving. And so, you know, I like to do that. Now, one of the things you had mentioned, I thought was kind of interesting, because I'm a spiritual guy, and I like serendipity, and I like things like that, but I also like when you just have a sense of something. I like when people talk about that. Like, I just knew this was going to happen, or I had this confidence that I was in the zone. You know, athletes get in the zone, and they knew when they shot the puck, they shot the ball, it was going to go in. They just knew it. And you were mentioning about a time you were in New Orleans, and you just could feel something palpable.
It just, I guess we were in New Orleans because we took it, my wife and I, we took a cruise out of there, and we decided to actually get there a day early and stay an extra day, because we felt like the city was worth it. It was a port of its own, you know, and it was worth spending a couple days there and kind of absorbing a little bit of the local culture, flavor, etc. It just felt to me as though there was this, it was like an undefined, almost like an overlying presence, and didn't feel bad, didn't feel good necessarily. It just felt somewhat foreign to me, somewhat undefined. Whereas I guess I just recognized it as though I was not in my house exactly. It felt like I was visiting somewhere, and obviously I was visiting, but in the sense of it just not like an outsider type of feeling, but almost like know where you're at.
Well, what's interesting about this, because I've known you for a while, and you know I like to talk about this kind of stuff. I wasn't raised this way, of course, but you're not somebody who normally says these kinds of things. Like, I wouldn't go so far as to say you're not spiritual. I think you are, but you're kind of humble about that stuff. So it's one thing if somebody like me says I was in New Orleans and I felt this, but for you to say it, I mean, you have that military background. You're a motorcycle guy. You're a tough dude. Like, so you know, you got some martial arts background. He also has been a bouncer and still does some of that. So not the guy you would think that would say something like that. So what made you so sure that?
I think it's the fact, I think it's the sense of what you mentioned as far as it's not typical for me, maybe. And because it did seem so almost obvious, but not my norm. I mean, I feel like I have a pretty good in like an intuitive type of nature, and definitely an empath of sorts, where I get a lot of, I feel, you know, and I try to embrace that. But with this, it was feeling like I was kind of in a special place that I didn't fully understand, you know. Maybe there was something that was, and we actually met somebody down there, a friend of ours now. We met a couple in that city, and it did kind of make sense as to why we ended up being there for a little bit of extra time.
Because I know Charleston has that same.
Oh, very
feel.
Similar to that. Yes, that's a great comparison, actually.
And they actually have tours in Charleston of like haunted houses.
I did the Old City Jail down there. I toured it on Halloween.
Okay. And now for religious people to talk about ghosts or paranormal stuff, they get very nervous. I'm not a huge, I don't want to say believer, because no one knows enough to be a cynic, as Wayne Dyer used to say. But I will say this. Everything has an energy signature, even things that are not living, even inanimate objects. I read about this in my book at the beginning. The first 40 pages of the book are basically to take somebody who doesn't really believe in anything, not spirituality, not religion, and to just say, how do you explain this? How do you explain that? There are so much phenomena out there. And then I get into a talk about tuning forks and how you can bang a tuning fork and any other tuning forks that are around are going to resonate, and some even at the same frequency. And human beings have an electrical system, and we emit an energy signature. but even a rock has an energy signature. When you look at it from a heat, those different scopes that they use. Okay, so just obviously you can't cover 40 pages of the book. To cut to what I'm saying is that if we emit and receive signals of energy from each other, and Einstein said that matter cannot be created or destroyed, well then when people die, okay, the body goes back into the soil or whatever, but where does the energy go? Isn't it possible, based on scientific theory and what I'm getting at, isn't it possible that there can be an essence, there can be a lingering of some kind? Now, whether that is a living thing and it affects, I don't know, but the fact that it's possible from that perspective, whether you want to believe in ghosts or not, isn't it possible? What would you say about the energy being there, and could that be what you felt and experienced?
I suppose it could be. I maybe what you're talking about, some would almost refer to as a soul or spirit or something along those lines. There was just Charleston was a great comparison, because I know when I did that tour with the they call it haunted, but a lot of the reasons why it would be haunted there isn't so much what we would consider like ghosts and goblins, but it was more the atrocities that happened in that facility under the hand of authority, and just stuff I wouldn't even really want to cover. Just horrible things that they would do to these prisoners, and a lot of times the prisoners happen to be mental patients that at the time the family would be a well-to-do family out of Charleston. They paid the jailer to kind of keep this family member that might not reflect well in the family. They just keep them in a chair, point them in a corner, and just they pay them to keep them there. And that was a lot, and it was just really going into the ideas to why people were there. It wasn't what we considered typical crime nowadays. A lot of it was just ostracism.
So the stuff that they talk about in Charleston, about like the haunted tours, and so that had to do with like mental pain. I assumed, I thought it was about like slavery, because I think that was a hotbed of the trading. I know New Orleans is.
I imagine
that's where a lot of that feeling, that visceral, palpable type feeling comes from. New Orleans was a very big stop on the slave trade, as was Memphis. Real quick, I mean, it made such an impression on me. I've been a real student of Memphis for years. Now I haven't been back in a while, but dated somebody very special, and she used to show me the city from the inside out. And I'm assuming they still have this street there, but they had a street called Auction Street, literally called Auction Street, and it's right on the Mississippi.
Still even, right?
Yep, and it's still on the Mississippi, there's a big block of concrete, and there's a park there now because it's right on the Mississippi River. But in the midst of this park, there's a big thing of concrete, and the shackles are still on the concrete to where they would have the slaves and stand and collared and to say, turn around and be sold, and then they'd be sold and put right on the ship or on the boat, right at the water. So, cities that have that kind of a legacy, I get it. And I guess I assumed that Charleston had that and not, you just told me something I did not know that about Charleston.
It may have been specific to this one jail tour. I didn't go through the whole haunted, the whole town aspect of those type. I know there are some additional tours down. This was specific to it's a jail that they closed down in maybe the early part of the 1900s, maybe into the 30s. I don't know, maybe a little before that. But just the absolutely inhumane things that happened there, based off certainly wasn't based off rehabilitation, but more off of fetish punishment, kind of just sickening. And when you find out that not everybody there was a criminal, many people were there because of being an embarrassment to the class system of families. As you know, Charleston is kind of a little bit of a bougie type, town. it's all about keeping up, not just keeping up with the Joneses, but being better than your counterparts in society.
Right.
And for whatever reason, that carried over into the New World, with the colonization. But
as far as you know, like, do you know anybody else, like, from that area, or anybody else who's visited who had a similar experience, or even outside of Charleston, like, where someone, because we were talking earlier about, I have a statue here that's made out of mahogany wood that I got in Haiti years ago, and
I like it.
Yeah, and I had mentioned to Stefan that earlier in my life I moved a lot, and so my statue had to be in the care of several different individuals, and there were several times where I was asked about it because it was made in Haiti, and I guess maybe it gives off a certain signature of some kind where dogs would bark at it, animals would react to it, and it happened at least 2 different occasions. I got called out of the blue about it, so I was just talking to him about that. And
you want to show it?
I guess we could.
Yeah,
He's my buddy.
Remind me of his name again.
Zechariah.
Zechariah.
It just
I think Zechariah take care of himself.
It just came to me. You know, he's beautiful. I mean, the detail on him and everything.
He's got a jacket on too. I'm just seeing that from seeing the revert, how his pants and jacket are actually different colors, and the attention to detail on that.
Yep.
All carved out of one piece. That's amazing work.
Yep. And I mean, it's so weird. I've had him so long, and Stefan just mentioned, you might not be able to see it, but some of these specific carvings, and they might be symbolic of something. And I said, I never thought of that. But yeah, I've had him a long, long time. And I'm definitely not somebody to want to scare anybody. And I don't totally give myself over to that. But I do believe that there's more than what we see. I mean, ultimately, it's the manifestation. Ultimately, we want to see something. Like, talk is cheap, show me something. That's generally what we do as people. We want to see. Don't just tell me you're going to write the book. Write it and then let me see it. But
so I can tear it down.
Yeah, well, but I just think it's so important what motivates, what's behind the creation. Excuse me, what's the soul of the artist? What made you, Michelangelo famously said, all I don't create anything. I just see what's inside the alabaster or inside the wood, and I just cut away and reveal what I see that's already in it. Well, but how did you get that vision? Somebody else would look at the same block of wood and not see it. I'm just curious in terms of what we were talking about, like if you know anybody who had the same type of feeling, whether it was Charleston, New Orleans, whatever.
Well, I did the tour in Charleston with an ex-girlfriend, and she and we discussed afterwards. We had some kind of similar take on the whole thing. And being married now for the past going on 7 years, my wife and I did the visit to New Orleans just about a year ago, and there was some intention on our part to spend some time in the town, being that we knew we were going to take the cruise out and come back and to the same port, but we intended to spend a couple of extra days there because I don't know what really motivated us to do that. That wouldn't be normally like us. We would probably just hit the city, just prior to getting onto the ship and go on. But we decided to spend some time there. It was to me, it was a place where it seemed like the folks that we met there, it was meant to happen. It wasn't, and some of them were locals. Mm-hmm. But we actually met a couple that's out of Newport News, Virginia, and she's actually very much a spiritual advisor to me now, Roxy, and we communicate with her. It's only been a year that we've known each other, but she literally came right up to us and came right up to Dawn. We were in a bar, everybody's in a bar,
right.
You're in New Orleans, and everybody we were drinking hand grenades at this particular bar, but.
She just picked you guys out.
She just literally walked up to Dawn and my wife, and she's like, "Yeah, we're supposed to be talking," and just started. We just started. We hit it off just like that, and it was, it's all that's happened since that point in our conversations. it wasn't just the few minutes that we interacted in New Orleans. It was the introduction to a person that literally I learned daily from her experience now. And
what did she advise you on or made you aware of?
I think, well, today one of the things that we discussed was how folks don't necessarily fall away from organized religion because they disagree with the teachings, but because they don't tend to mesh well with the followers. You just don't feel like you would so much want to associate with those folks. But and something that you mentioned to me a while back that it keeps ringing in my ears: you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, like I get it. You know, that's you're right. You know, and it's where you've known me many times over the years to think maybe I'm devoid of spiritual connections and that type of thing. Maybe I just sort of appear that way, but it's not. It's important for me not to throw away the truth.
Well, I mean,
just because I don't like the message, the messenger. Well, don't throw away the message.
It's very, 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 very challenging. In some ways, it's more challenging to be a spiritual person or a religious person than it is to not be, because when bad things happen and confusing things happen, somebody who's a non-believer deals with it as best they can, and when it's over, it's over. But a spiritual person and somebody who leans that way takes it on a different level. They personalize it more. It's more, why is this happening to me? Every time something really good or really bad happens, I know I do this. I say, okay, what does this mean? Let me process this. Let me not get too deep into my own stuff. And I'd say, man, if I were just living in the natural world, I would just say, this is what it is. This is what I'll do. And then that's it. That's the end of it. But I do believe, and this is really for the viewers and listeners, that what we're talking about is something that's extraordinary, something that's not, that you can't sense with your traditional senses.
Intangible.
Right, good word. And that that's encouraging in and of itself, because it does let you know that this isn't all there is. There is more to our world, and by extension, microcosm, our lives. So when we do have a bad day at work, or we get a bad news report or a medical report, it does help to know that there are other forces at work that can work to our benefit. Now, there may be forces that work against you as well, but depending on your perspective, if you know there are negative forces at work, you can have in many ways a better attitude about it, because it's not so much that you blame those negative forces, but there are other things working against you.
Kind of know what to expect, or to expect it to exist, and it's not a surprise. It's like,
and you don't blame yourself. Like you don't just say, oh man, I did this, I did that. If you know you've done everything you know to do, and you're doing the best you can, and you could never have predicted this was going to happen, then you just don't blame yourself. And when you believe that what is real is not just what we see and hear, then you have faith in something that's outside of yourself. And that's what I guess people mean when they say the higher power. And that can be strengthening. It can be reinforcing as much as it can, like I was saying a minute ago, it can also kind of go the other way sometimes. Because if you believe in the higher power, and then you suffer through something, you say, well, why did this happen? But it does. It happens. Everything happens to everybody. What we call good and bad is really our perception.
Sure.
And that what I think is so terrible, somebody else could look at and go, are you kidding me?
We see the back side of the tapestry. We see all the knotted, all the cords and all the things that make it what it is, and then the pictures on the other side. We see the handiwork, some of it behind it, and it's not beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's rough looking compared to the finished product.
I mean, it's just, that's the thing, is that we you know, so one man's garbage is another man's treasure kind of thing, that I've heard people tell me about their problems, and I always try to be sensitive, but some people would refer to these problems as champagne problems. Like, wow, I wish I had your problems
Right.
instead of my problems. And I'm guilty of it too. You know, some of the things that get me down sometimes, you know, depending on what company I'm keeping, they look at me and go, at least you have a house. At least you have a car. You know, you're upset because your car is 21 years old, but at least you have a car. You don't have enough storage space in your house for things that you have. Like, that's great that you have enough things that you would need storage space. Stefan, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah.
We've known each other a long time. I really appreciate you doing this. Learning how to body surf is similar to catching the Holy Spirit. You know, when you want to learn it, it's very exciting to ride a wave with your body, and it looks like so much fun, but until you do it, it's very hard to learn. And when you overanalyze it and think about it too much, it makes it that much harder for you to get. And it's kind of like the Holy Spirit, at least for me. I tried so hard for so long, talked to so many people about it, and then usually when you take your mind off of it, you just go with it, and you have to trust it. I think part of the thing that's hard for a lot of people to get it is, and I believe it's the same thing with the Holy Spirit, you have to surrender. You can't overanalyze, you can't just read a lot of scripture. There's a force underneath you that is pushing you at a high rate of speed, and it can be a little scary because you've never done it before. You don't know exactly how fast you're gonna go. You don't know if you're gonna get hurt. You get scared because you have to let go. Once you jump into the wave, you have to really surrender to the wave and the power of it. And if you hesitate at all, you're gonna miss it. If you don't stay on the surface of the water, you go down too deep, you miss it. If you pull up at all, you miss it. So any little thing you do is gonna get in the way of you catching that wave.